Hey there, beer friends. So it's been a while. As you can see, I'm in yet another different location. I've been in California now for a week and a half, helping my mother with her knee surgery. So it's been a lot, and so I've been trying to film this video, and I just have not had time. I've hardly slept. But she's taking a nap right now, so I decided to seize the opportunity. I'm also outside, it's really windy, so hopefully my notes don't blow away. But what I wanted to talk about today was sort of my post-Cicerone exam review, because I took the test in April. I wanted to just kind of briefly talk again about the purpose of this channel. If you're new here, my name is Tammy, and I was a brewer. Now I've been working in wine for about 2 years. But I've been studying for about a year and a half for my Certified Cicerone exam. So I wanted to kind of film some videos that might help other people that are studying. But basically, when I started my, journey, let's say, with the studying, I found that there weren't a lot of helpful things out there on the internet. Like, you can find, study guides and practice tests and things like that, but none of those really helped me specifically. So what I wanted to do was sort of go through beer styles that I'm not that great with and sort of describe them and then film them so that maybe other people that are watching would, learn something as well. But also the whole habit of just trying the beer helps me kind of retain those stats in my brain. So that's kind of why I started this channel. I took a little segue, we went on vacation in March with my family, and so I was talking about the different beers that I found in the Caribbean. And so now I'm back to the Cicerone content. But before I go too much further, I feel like I have to drink a beer while I'm talking. So it's really exciting because since I've been in California, my brother came over and brought me a bunch of bottles of really nice, expensive barrel-aged beers from the brewery, which is in Placentia. And the one that I'm going to open today, and they're not just beers, like bottles of beer, they're like wine bottle size. And this one is actually 13.5% alcohol. So basically it's like a wine. But he had a friend that gave up drinking, and these were all like collectors type bottles that you would cellar or age. And so he just gave them all to my brother. So my brother brought me like 10 of these last week, and I haven't tried any of them yet. So again, this is from the brewery, and it looks like they did a collab with Three Floyds, which is the brewery, I want to say they're in Indiana, and they make zombie dust, so they're pretty well known. So this is called Rue de Floyd, and it is an imperial porter aged with vanilla in bourbon barrels, tart cherries, and coffee. So obviously that sounds amazing, and because I don't have super proper glassware, I'm gonna drink it out of a wine glass because I feel like it's fancy and it needs like a nice glass. So I'm gonna try and open this while I talk. So for those of you that don't know, the Cicerone program is sort of there we go. It's a program where you learn about beer, like service, beer styles, food and beer pairing, what else? Ingredients, process, that kind of thing. But it's not really an exam where you learn to become a brewer. It helps if you're a brewer and you already know a lot of that information, but basically it's for like service. So there's 4 different levels. There's the certified beer server, that's level 1. Oh wow, this looks like syrup. I'm really excited about this. This is so exciting. I don't know how old this is. 2017, so this is 8 years old. That's very exciting. Oh, it almost smells like peppery. Okay. Sorry, I totally got distracted by the beer. That's really thick. I definitely get coffee. And maybe some sourness of the cherry. The this would be nice like over ice cream or in like a fudge sauce over ice cream. Wow. I have never actually been to the brewery in Placentia because it opened like many years after I moved away from California, but it was on my list and I hope I can make it there this trip. So back to the program. Sorry, I digress. So there's 4 levels. There's certified beer server, which is just like an introductory level. Maybe you work at a brewery or a bar and you just want to kind of have like a base background knowledge on beer and beer service. That's level 1. It's pretty simple. And in order to move up to any level, you have to complete the previous level. So that's level 1. Level 2 is Certified Cicerone, which is what I've been studying for. There's a little bit more involved. There's an online test that's quite a bit longer and more in depth. And then there's also an in-person tasting exam and demonstration. And those happen at separate times. Then you've got Advanced Cicerone, which is level 3. And again, it's the same setup and just like it sounds, more advanced than just the certified. And then you have Master Cicerone. And that one is like kind of, you know, the final boss. It's over the course of a few days. And some people study for years for that one. And a lot of people take it more than once. So with that said, there's very few Master Cicerones out there. Maybe at some point in the future, I'll think about that, but right now I'm focused on the certified. So that's kind of the overview of the program. I have a brewer friend who was able to get access to like the online study materials that are created by the Cicerone program. And so maybe in like November or October of 2023, she asked if I wanted to go through the modules with her and study, and then we could take the test. And I was like, sure, let's do it. So we started studying in December of 2023, and I finally took my written test in April of 2025. And so basically that's like a year and a half of studying. And obviously there's life and things that happen and, you know, vacations and work and et cetera. So we started out really well with doing like one session a week. We would get together, usually where she works, so then we could drink beer. And then it kind of got to be like maybe a couple times a month, and then sometimes it was a few months in between. So, you know, it's hard to keep that up, but we tried. So we studied in person. I also did a lot of reading. Obviously, like I went through, you know, books that I have. I did like internet searches and research. What else? I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Cicerone actually has their own YouTube channel, and they do these like educational minutes. And so they'll do like a quick topic in the course of like 90 seconds or something. So I watched those. They have one that's about beer styles. So I watched, you know, that one. It's a couple hours, I think. What else? And then I actually reached out to a woman in Detroit who I knew was, she's an advanced Cicerone, but she also does some grading for Cicerone, like grading the exams, and she also does teaching. So she does some of the in-person, like, off flavor tasting sessions. And so I met her in January of 2024, and I asked her if she would be willing to sort of like guide me or mentor me. And what she did was she actually found like 4 or 5 other women in the Detroit area. Some were people that I already knew, and she kind of created this little study group. And so we would go to her house every so often. We went maybe like 3 times last year, and she would have us there like all day, and we would do, you know, go over lessons. We would eat lunch, which she usually made, and it was amazing. She has like a full like brewery basically in her basement with like a draft system. So we would go over like draft setup and things like that and service. And so I did that as well. So basically I kind of did a lot of different things to help study, because I don't think that just doing any one thing would have been enough for me personally. So that's kind of how I studied. If you do the modules that Cicerone offers online, you can buy them. They come with a little practice test at the end of each section. So there's 6 basic modules. There's keeping and serving, there's ingredients and process, and then there's the four main beer style categories. So there's UK, which is like England and Ireland. There's Belgian styles, German and Czech styles, and then American beer styles. And so basically, once you go through each like little section, like maybe one section would be like German dark beers, and then you'd have German lagers, and then you'd have German sours and whatever. You'd go through like the whole thing, and then at the end you would do a practice test. So I would do those as well. And the nice thing is that the practice tests are set up the same way as they are in the actual test. So you kind of learn like the computer system, the testing system, and how the questions are written. But you can take the test as many times as you want. So you have to get minimum, I think, 80% to pass. And even if you get 80%, 90%, whatever, you can keep doing the test over and over so that you can just keep practicing. So I did that every so often. Sometimes I would just be watching TV and I'd think like, okay, let me just take this practice test and see, how I'm doing this week or whatever. What I told myself initially was that once I passed the practice, like the main practice test on each of those 6 modules, then I would be ready for the actual exam. I did okay on the ingredients and the process, having studied brewing science. I did pretty good with keeping and serving. I was okay at American styles, sadly, because I thought that would be my best section, but it really wasn't. UK and Irish, or like England and Irish, the UK styles, I did all right. I did better with German styles after I went to Germany last year, which like I knew that was going to be a good study moment for me when I was there to try all these different styles and like learn the history and the process. Did really bad on Belgian styles. Not my best section, and it still probably isn't. So I passed the 5 module practice exams and not the Belgian, and I just kept thinking to myself, if I keep waiting until I pass this one final module test, I might not ever be ready. So that was kind of one thing that was like, okay, we need to like move on or, just forget it overall. So another thing that kind of spurred me to take the test when I did was that in maybe January of this year, Cicerone said that they were going to raise the prices on the testing. So basically you sign up for the online test and the in-person test separately, and you can take them in either order, and you don't have to take them like even near each other. You could take one and then do one the next year or whatever. So as it stands now, the online exam is $250 US, which is, I don't know, like probably $1 million Canadian. And then the tasting exam is $200 US. So that's the price now. Before it was a little cheaper. So I wanted to sign up at least for the online exam so that I could get that cheaper price. So I had to choose a date that was, reasonable given my schedule. So I chose April, like end of April. Another reason I took it when I did was because I wanted to see how the test was set up, like how the questions were presented, and kind of how they asked certain questions, like mostly the food pairing. But I wanted to see what it was like, because after you take the test and you get your results, they actually give you a breakdown of how you did in each section. So it'll say like with food and beer pairing, this is how you did. And then it'll actually kind of go through like almost question by question, how you did without giving too much detail. But I wanted to have that information because I thought I'm only studying the same modules over and over again. So I need to know how I'm doing in order to be able to change my study habits if I'm not doing really well in one area, because I felt like, I could study, like German lager or American IPA until like the cows come home, but I know those things. So I needed to know where I was struggling. So that's kind of another reason why I took the test. And I forgot to mention that I also did try to listen to a lot of podcasts. Jen Blair and her friend Rachel, whose last name I can't remember, they do one called False Bottom Girls, and they have a couple different episodes about taking, like, I think the advanced test and the master test, and they have a lot of tips and tricks and things like that. But they also do a lot of like beer service, glassware, different styles, things like that. So I tried to do a lot of podcasts as well, because I could listen to those like when I was at work and things like that. So it's kind of the background of why I started this channel, how long I've been studying, what I felt helped, what I felt didn't help, and different study methods. And I will say too, one other thing is that Cicerone, on their actual official website, they do have a practice test for the Certified Cicerone exam. So you can't really do it online, but you can print it out and like write on it or whatever. And the bummer about that is, one second while I take a sip of this porter. Man, we need more barrel-aged porters out there. The bummer about the online practice test is there's two different things. One is that there's only one version. So I maybe did that like 3 different times, and over the course of like a year. So I would do it, and then I would wait a few months, I would do it again, and then wait a few months. And so basically, if you kind of remember the questions, you like, are you really like learning, or am I just memorizing like, these certain answers? So I feel like if there were more versions, it would be really helpful, and then you could have someone like, mix it up for you and hand you one version, and then another time they hand you another version, or whatever. So that was like not ideal. But the other thing is that they don't offer answers. So I found one person online that had a blog who provided what he thought the answers were. And the issue with that was that his version that he was providing answers for was an older version, so that the numbers and the questions didn't match up. But also he had opinions on what he thought the answers were, and they maybe were not correct. So unless you can find someone that can like grade these answers for you, it's maybe not super helpful. And luckily I did have my friend Annette in Detroit who grades these tests, and so she went over it with me like the week before my exam, and so we went through all the answers and things like that. And I will say the most important piece of advice that she gave me, and I even wrote this on a piece of like painter's tape, and I taped it to my screen, my computer screen, as I was taking the test, was read the question. You definitely are not going to run out of time. You have 3 hours to take this test. And even with the practice test, I found myself like reading part of the question, and then I figured, I know what it's asking, and then I'll just, answer it, whatever. And she would say, read the question. Like, it's asking for more than one example, or it's asking for like a commercial example, not just a style of beer name, if that makes sense. And so I would just kind of rush through these things, and questions that I knew the answers to, I would get wrong, because I just was like so worried about, being able to finish. So I had that piece of tape on the computer while I was taking the test, and I would look at it, and I would be like, read the question, like don't like, blow through, don't, skip things, don't skip words. And it really helped me to like remember to like read each word. So basically I would say the test itself, I can't really give any details on what it was like, because you're not supposed to reveal like what sort of questions you had, but I can tell you kind of how they're set up. So you're gonna have like some fill in the blank, some are like a short answer, some are multiple choice, not a whole lot, some are matching, where it's like, they have a picture and you match it with like an answer, or it'll say like, here's a food, what kind of beer would you pair it with, and you're like matching. And then you've got like essay questions where you have to obviously write a little bit more. And I believe on the essay questions, there's no like, what's it called? There's no like word maximum. So you could just write, as much as you want, because the question will tell you, please hit these like main points, and this is how much each of those points is like bullet points is worth. So, if you feel like you need to write like an entire page just to explain, what isomerization is or whatever, then, you just write as much as you want. And then they give points based on like, did you correctly address those different bullet points, and then how well did you address them. So I will say, first things first, the very first question asked about the drinking age in one of our provinces, which I didn't know. So right off the bat, I got my first question wrong. And so I started to feel a little bit like, well, that's not good. So it got better, I will say that. I left the test feeling confident. One thing that was nice was that I could remember some of the questions that I wasn't sure about, and I immediately went and checked like my notes and my books and things like that, and I knew either like I got it right or I got it wrong, or it was like, well, it could go either way if it was like an essay question. So I ended the test feeling pretty confident, and I actually took the entire 3 hours. My tip for taking the test is to review each question. So when you are taking this test, like through their online test website, you can click a little box on each question that says review later or something like that. You can get to the end and then just like go back each web page until you get to the beginning. But if you go all the way through the test and you just click that on each separate question, it'll basically start over for you to review each question. So I did that. I clicked every single question because I wanted to review every single question. And I'm glad I did, because there were some where I felt like I don't know right now. I know that I know, but I can't think of it right now, so I'm going to come back to it later. So that's my main tip, because you should always just review everything and not just like answer your questions and submit, because you definitely are going to have time to go through them. So those are kind of like my main tips for like taking the test. They say it takes about 6 weeks to get your results, and I actually got them within 3 weeks, I think. I got an email overnight, or like at 9 o'clock at night, and I decided I didn't want to read the results just in case. I wanted to be able to like sleep a little bit better. So the next morning, I checked it while my husband was sitting with me, and it turns out that I passed. So I think I ended up getting like 79 or almost 80%. We'll just say 80%. And the nice thing about that is that means that when I go to take the in-person tasting portion, I don't have to do as well on that. You have to get a total of 80% overall, I believe, and then you have to get minimum 70% on the tasting portion. So that means I really only need to get 70%, which is like amazing. So yeah, they give you your breakdown of like how you did. They kind of go through all the different sections. It'll actually say like, maybe you had this many questions about American, light lager, and you got this many right or this many wrong, that kind of thing. And it goes through every beer style that you're asked about. And I also did pretty okay in like, I don't think they call it obscure beer styles, but it is basically obscure beer styles. It's like the ones that you've never tried in your life and you'll never see anywhere, but like it's in there somewhere that you should learn this beer. And so I did okay on those. Yeah, so basically they give you your results and that kind of thing. And I mean, I guess that's like basically my review. I'm at the point now where I've scheduled my tasting exam for the end of August. So what that includes is you do a tasting and then like a demonstration. So the tasting is usually, you have to identify off flavors, and you either say like, yes, this has an off flavor, no, it doesn't. If it does, what is the off flavor and where would it come from? And then you might do some beer comparisons. Well, they'll give you a beer, you'll taste the sample, and then it'll say, is it this beer or this beer? And maybe it'll be like, I don't know, like a porter and like a Schwartz beer. So it's like they might look similar, they might both be like dark, but they taste differently. So obviously you'll taste it and you'll know like it's this or it's that. I think there might also be an essay question, and I'm not sure. And then when you've done that part, you go and you do like a demonstration, and that's usually where they'll hand you like a piece of equipment, and they'll say, tell us everything you can about this piece of equipment. Like, what does it do? How do you clean it? Why is it important, et cetera, so on. So basically, that's just like a demo where you talk and then they film you. So because there were very few of these in-person tasting exams in Canada for the year, I think there were only like 2. and then they just added Toronto. I decided to go ahead and register for it because I want to still have things like kind of fresh in my mind. Because I feel like if I get too far, once we start with our grape harvest in like late August, I'm not going to be able to do anything, and so it would be like January of next year. So I wanted to try and do it as soon as possible. So I'm going to be doing that, which means that I'm going to be practicing like some of my tasting. So another thing that Cicerone has, I believe it's Cicerone, it's where you can create your own off flavor like spike kits. So I talked about this in another video, but basically a spike kit is like when you have your sample of beer, it's like usually like a light lager, and then you spike it with this off flavor, and there's different versions or brands you can buy, but if you can't afford it, like a lot of us can't, you can make your own. And so they give you this like list of how to create these off flavors. So I went out and I bought beer last week, and someone that I know that does these things told me, and I don't think this is a secret, but they basically said that the beer that Cicerone will use during these exams is Amstel Light. And now that I think about it, I'm not even sure if we can get Amstel Light in Canada, but it'll be something very similar to that. So I've got my 6-pack of Amstel Light. I've got my list of how to make these off flavors, and then I will probably do some videos on that and the tasting and like how to, you know, dose the beer and that kind of thing. So hopefully I'll get to that pretty soon. And then that's kind of it. I'm just gonna be studying the next couple months. I did, you know, look at some of the information for the advanced Cicerone test, just because I thought, again, if I want to, you know, go another level, I want to sort of do it now while I'm in this like studying mode, and I know how the tests work and things like that. So I don't know, I might look into that. But a lot of it too is like a financial thing, because they're not cheap. If you end up having to like retake the exam, either one, it's a little bit cheaper than the first price, but you know, I'd rather spend $200 than $500. So that's kind of my goal. Yeah, so I hope I covered everything. I did write down a little, you know, outline here, but I tend to get distracted. And I actually filmed this video weeks ago, but it was after a day of blending wine and tasting, and so it was like kind of all over the place, so I thought I would redo it. But yeah, I mean, if you have any questions about taking the exam, studying, you know, study resources, things like that, like please feel free to like send me a message or leave a comment. But basically I just thought, you know, maybe this would help some of you out there with your studying to know kind of how it's set up and how the process works. So until next time, when I do some different off flavor tastings, I will say cheers. Thank you for joining me on this beer journey. And I'll probably be tasting more of these too. I have about 8 of them, plus some really nice special IPAs. So it'll be exciting. So cheers.